Democratic Whip.
Madam President, imagine this. In one of the great nations of the world, there is a controversy over a transition of power, the peaceful transfer of power. And in this country, those who are about to lose power are concerned, so concerned that their backers are turning to the streets. They plan on demonstrations against the supposed new leadership in their country, and people fear violence. It was against this background that Nadav Argaman, the director of Shin Bet, Israel's internal security service, made a rare public intervention on Saturday night, warning of discourse that is, quote, liable to be interpreted by certain groups or by individuals as one that permits violent and illegal activity that is liable, heaven forbid, to reach mortal injury, end of quote. Without mentioning any politicians directly, Mr. Argaman added, quote, it's our duty to come out with a clear and decisive call to stop immediately the inciting and violent discourse. The responsibility for calming spirits and reining in the discourse rests on all of our shoulders. I bring this matter to the floor of the Senate because it parallels what we endured and experienced just a few months ago. I'm sure you remember it well, Madam President, I do. An election last November, which was won by Joseph Biden over Donald Trump, the incumbent president, by some 7 million votes, one of the largest turnouts, if not the largest turnout in the history of the United States. A decisive electoral college victory, the same margin that Trump had triumphed over Hillary Clinton just a few years before. And yet, because of the big lie and the denial by Donald Trump, he inspired his followers to come to Washington, D.C. and participate in a rally to protest. And not to come just any day, but to come on January 6th of 2021 this year, because that's when the Electoral College votes are going to be counted. We know what followed. We know that mob was turned loose in the streets of Washington and turned loose on the Capitol building, and those of us who were here that day will never forget it. I can recall the Vice President of the United States being pulled from that chair that you're sitting in, Madam President, taken out that door. It was about 2:15 in the afternoon, and then a member of the Capitol Police stood before us and warned us, stay in your seats, this will be a safe place to be. We're going to gather all the staff around the walls here. Just sit tight. 10 minutes later, he came back and said, change of plans. The mob is advancing on this chamber as we speak. Leave immediately. And everyone picked up as fast as they could and left. It was a scene that seemed so unrealistic. You wouldn't imagine it could happen in the capital of the United States of America. But the insurrectionist mob, inspired by President Donald Trump, was here for business. They were here to stop the ordinary course of business in the Senate and the House, which would announce at the end of the day the selection of Joseph Biden as our new president. Now a parallel is taking place in Israel, and a new coalition to replace Bibi Netanyahu is being contested by those who are going to march in the streets. And the Israeli leaders, at least those in the security services, are begging people not to do it. I put that in context to think that that idea in the United States somehow has taken root in Israel. I pray that nothing happens. I want nothing to happen there. But we should be forewarned to take this seriously. If there are forces at work in the United States and Israel and other countries to stop the orderly transfer of power in a democratic nation, we ought to take that seriously. We ought to take it so seriously that we appoint a bipartisan commission to investigate what happened here on January 6, 2021. Just a few weeks ago, Republican members of the House of Representatives were dismissing the January 6th events, the mob action here in the Capitol, and saying that they were somehow orderly tourists. That's what one of the congressmen said, a congressman from Georgia, a Republican. Those were orderly tourists. Look at those videos and imagine under any circumstance that you would describe them as orderly tourists. They weren't orderly tourists when we see 5 people losing their lives as a result of their actions and 140 of our law enforcement officials being personally attacked, many of them still bearing the scars of that day. I bring this to the attention of the Senate and the American people because I think the answer is obvious. Israel's taken it seriously. They don't want a Trump-like mob to take control in their country. We shouldn't be allowing this to happen, nor should we stop with what we've done and say no more will be said. This was a direct attack on our democracy. We cannot find, unfortunately, in Republican leadership, one Republican leader who will support this idea of a bipartisan commission. And when it comes to January 6th, the job isn't finished. The last point I'll make is we received a letter, an anonymous letter, from the Capitol Hill Police asking us to form this commission and get to the bottom of it. To think that we walk through this Capitol every day and those men and women are risking their lives for us, and we would not even allow a bipartisan commission to look into that day and the threats to the lives of those policemen on that day is shameful. It's disgraceful. It's unacceptable. Senator Schumer said we'll vote on it again. I hope we do, and frequently, so we can remind the American people who is taking that event very seriously and who is not.